Hey everyone, my name is Maureen Castellan. I help you launch by lunch. I was in the classroom for 12 years, marketing for 15, and for the past 5 years, I've been helping solopreneurs and corporations set up their courses and podcasts. I started my career off in SEO. I was asked to ghostwrite a business book on digital marketing. And this is when people would get SEO and CEO confused, and it was a lot, and people didn't understand A/B testing. So I got very lucky that I kind of had to write a book to learn about all these things. And it became my calling card. I would, back when I had to apply for jobs, I would send excerpts of my book and people would be like, "Oh, this is very good. You wrote this. Oh, wow, great." And then they would give me jobs, because I was a copywriter. I was a copywriter for a very long time before I became a strategist. Now I don't do as much writing, but that's by choice. It's just, when I was younger, I very much wanted to be a writer. And now that I'm, older, I'm thinking more about, that's very intense. And I kind of want to start not having an intense life, if that makes sense. So I started off my career with SEO, and I topped the SERP at 10 million results for the Holy Trinity of watches. Very proud of that. So I got a lot of work in SEO. I didn't do the back end, but I know enough from the front end. I just did White Hat SEO. So there's Black Hat, which is like, a bunch of spammers and scammers and all that good stuff. And then Gray Hat, where it's like, well, I mean, you really shouldn't be doing this, but I guess you can get away with it. And White Hat is no issues at all whatsoever. And I always stayed very much within the White Hat space. So, SEO has changed a lot, especially with podcasts. And and I've been doing these like topics for marketing, like 4 questions to ask yourself to get your podcast, 4 questions to ask yourself to get your podcast started, how to niche down and everything like that. And I've had more technical in my background than the average writer. I'm not a tech writer by any means, but I do have a lot of tech knowledge as it relates to SEO. So we're going to kind of get into that today. I'm super excited about this. So, once I always say once you learn something, the game completely changes. And that's so true. So once you learn SEO, you think, okay, well, I got it. I'm going to do my blue links. I'm going to, write my, bajillion pages for my blog. And then, the game has changed. The game has really changed, and it's kind of cool to see. So I have this podcast, and then I have my spooky podcast. And I started my spooky podcast because I was laying in bed recovering from surgery. And it was, I would sit on a nest of heating pads, and I was like, well, what can I do? And so I started my podcast that way. And then in January, someone wrote about me on Reddit, and my spooky podcast blew up. And I just wasn't prepared because it was just like my hobby. And I had to crank out socials really fast. I had to monetize really fast. And I had to learn like a whole bunch of stuff. I had to transfer from just audio and using my little mic here to actually having video. And then I had to go and get a background. And this is from Turkey. And I had to start thinking about my colors and all of that good stuff. So it was a lot that went into it. So, it was easier when it was just audio, but then when it became video, it was like, oh, wow. And the thing is, your podcast will be very, very successful once you start doing video within reason. I mean, depends on what you're doing in your video, but it's very much about getting your visuals out there and having listenable assets. Isn't that a great word? Listenable assets. So you may think, oh, well, I have the SEO down. And then have you heard of AEO and GEO? I know, right? Oy. So it's going to be a little confusing for some of you. So I'm just going to talk to you guys like I would in one of my classrooms. Okay, do not worry if you do not get this at first. You can always email me at maureencastellan@gmail.com. Once again, that's maureencastellan@gmail.com. And we'll go over this as much as you need to. It's, I was in the classroom for 12 years. I used to have a lot of unique students asking me the date all of the time. So I promise you that annoyed me a little bit, but this doesn't annoy me. Okay. So we're going to go through everything. I'm going to put this in the notes. We got this, okay? So SEO is a lot about keywords and, getting, links back and everything like that. And, having Google favor you. So every time Google had like an update or, like the Panda and all of that, you had to kind of figure out what the new algorithm was and appease it. So you had to do a lot of content. You had to put in search terms. You had to really do long tail and short tail keywords. Okay, so like an example of a short tail would be umbrellas in Miami. And then the long tail would be umbrellas in Miami imported from Italy, Spain, and Greece, something like that. So a lot of people got around that because this was before AI. So people, would hire writers to write long blog posts, which is what I did. And then they started, doing transcripts and uploading transcripts. Hey, you want a transcript of our latest, trade show? We put it here. So you did SEO through keywords and through transcripts and through appeasing the Google algorithm. And then AI came around, and then video podcasting came around full force, and it changed the game. Alexa came around full force. So I'm just going to let you guys know now, I don't do Alexas. Okay. I don't have any devices in my life. I used to be really poor. So I never got into that. But I think it's great. And a lot of people do. But once Alexa came into being, a lot of people would just be like, hey, Alexa, what's the fastest way to grow my podcast? Hey, Alexa, what's AEO? Hey, Alexa, what background would look good? Hey, Alexa, this, that, and the other. And then Alexa would give back an answer. And the answer engine, you can also call it the Alexa engine, which I do, the AEO would answer. And the way that you would really make yourself hot property to Alexa and Siri and all that was you would rely very heavily on the first sentence in your episode description. So I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. And as a former writer, it's kind of killing me to say this. If you only have one sentence, you can still rank. You can still get, you can still be discoverable. I know. My little writer self is dying inside. But your first sentence needs to knock it out of the park. Be very keyword rich, not stuffing, but very keyword rich. And once you really focus on your first sentence, then you'll get favored by Alexa in voice search. And I'm going to do a workshop soon where we're going to really brainstorm our first sentences. And, from my background, being a writer for 15 years longer and all my stuff, I'm going to show you how to really optimize the first sentence. Okay. And I recognize I did not do that since I restarted this, but I will be doing it from now on. So we have hot property, your first sentence, SEO, keywords, transcripts, appeasing Google. And then now we have GEO. So GEO is really about answering questions and asking the right questions. So, I remember when I was studying Tibetan Buddhism in Thailand, someone said, the right questions can take you everywhere. But when I was doing SEO, when I broke the 10 million results on the search, I asked, so each subheading was a question. Okay. So the titles of your podcast episodes should be questions. So, you know, I'm going to do some sort of variation of what is CEO, AEO, and GEO, and why does it matter when you are building your podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon? Okay. So I'm asking a question the same as you would type in or say out loud, and it would pull up this result. Okay. So we're going to focus on asking the right question. And I know I'm like, you're like, why is she smiling like that? It's a little creepy. It's because I want you to remember it. Okay. I would throw some confetti, but the dog would get excited. You really, really need to sit down and understand that by asking the right questions, you can start really getting traction for your podcast. So you might be like, but Em, how do I do that? You know, I'm gonna, you know, I figured out my keywords. My first sentence is hot to trot. And then, you know, how do I make GEO happy? The GEO gods happy. So you in your episode descriptions, the first sentence is really hot and optimized. That's when you put in the right keywords, not stuff them. Hot first one, hot first sentence, the transcripts. And then at the bottom, okay, you guys, make a note. To appease the GEO gods, you do 3 frequently asked questions. So for this episode, it's going to be, what is SEO? Does SEO still matter? No, I was going to say, does SEO still matter in 2026? But if someone were to go bare bones and be like, what is SEO? And then I'm going to give them some really optimized answers. And then the next question would be, what is AEO? And then the next question will be, what is GEO? And then I'm going to answer everything. And then one of the keys is, it's called entities. Drop some big names. Pretend I live in Miami, so everyone here is always dropping names. It's really annoying. And you know, it's seen as trustworthy when you say, oh, you know, something about podcasts on Spotify, podcasts on Apple, podcasts on Amazon. You know, so if you can mention a big name, you're going to be considered a safe podcast. Is that fair? No, but that's capitalism, baby. So let's do another recap, okay? Because I've allotted a little bit more time for this. If you're like, well, you know, how can I think of a new way to do this because this information's all new? That's great, fine. So for those of you that are, you know, maybe grew up in the 80s and 90s, you went to Blockbuster on Friday nights. You went to Blockbuster. You put in your order for pizza. Went to Blockbuster, picked up a few movies, the ones that are still there, and then you went and you picked up your pizza order. This is for you, okay? Let's say you're going to the library and you're looking for answers. The SEO would be like the index cards. You know, you would go over to the card catalog, pull it out, and get the right index card. And that would be where you get your information. Those are your backlinks, whatever. So you go and you find what you're looking for. So that's SEO. For AEO, let's say you just go up to the desk and there is a librarian, my old editor of 14 years. She was a librarian in Ohio. Miss her every day. I imagine her like in a back room or getting, you know, whatever, and then just saying, hey, Alexa, you know, what's the answer? What's the answer to X, Y, and Z? And then her calling it back out. That would be AEO. And then what if I go up to the desk and there's an intern there or some like latchkey kid that knows the library inside and out. And I'm just like, hey, where do I find this? Or what's the answer to this? And they give it to me. That's GEO. Okay, so we have SEO, AEO, and GEO. So I'm going to go over the definitions again, and then I'm going to give you examples. And if you're like, wow, you are really going over this, this is what it was like. This is what I do when I do my courses and my own, stuff is information presented over and over again. And if you're listening to this a couple of times, awesome. That's what I'm here for. When I learn something new, or I know that someone doesn't know something that I know, I always try to help. So SEO is keywords, appeasing Google, and transcripts. So we pick out our good keywords. I can help you pick them out. We pick out the really good keywords and we set them aside, and we know that we have to weave them through everything. We're going to try to rank. We're going to see if we can have some high velocity keywords, some that you can easily, make your own, everything like that. I could spend hours talking about keywords, but just to keep this very high level. So we have that for SEO. So it's keywords, appeasing Google, and transcripts. That's SEO. AEO is the answer engine like Alexa and Siri. So we're making our sentences hot to trot. Our first sentence is hot to trot. Smoking, baby. Okay. And then for GEO, we're having 3 questions and answers at the end. So our episode description should be hot to trot first sentence, some copy. I almost said verbiage because I've been working in corporate too long. Hot first sentence. A pretty decent paragraph. Transcript, show notes, however you want to call them, however you want to refer to them, or whatever variation you have in your head that is, what you've heard on another podcast or whatever. And then at the bottom, 3 questions and answers that are keyword rich, not stuffed, but keyword rich. And then, that's it. That is it. That is SEO, AEO, and GEO. If you have any questions, let me know. You can reach me at maureencastelon@gmail.com. You can schedule a time to talk with me. I have it on my link tree for this podcast that you get a freebie. You get a template that helps you figure out your podcast a little bit more. We go a little bit more in depth, and then you can use that. You can bring that when we have our 15-minute chat together. We strategize, and then we talk about how we can work together in the future, flesh out a couple of ideas. So if you have a podcast idea you're not sure what to do with yet, schedule a time. If you have a podcast that's not quite working and you want to pivot, schedule a time. I'm always happy to go through everything. Let's see. Yeah, and then you can join me on the socials. I'm Pass Me the Mic on TikTok and YouTube. I had to transfer those over. But yeah, you guys, listen to this episode a couple of times. Leave me any comments or questions. I'll be happy to, sorry, I've been talking a while. I'll be happy to answer them. And, I look forward to working with you in the future. Take care. Bye.